Well, it's increasingly looking like Kamala Harris is going to be nabbing Biden's VP spot, which means Hillary Clinton is actually nabbing Biden's VP spot. I'm going to explain and why Hillary Clinton would want to do this. Well, it's because she's still trying to get payback against Vladimir Putin. I'm going to explain, but first, subscribe to this channel if you are new to it. This is where you will get a logical leftist perspective on today's current events. So let's go ahead and go into what is going on, how Hillary Clinton is ultimately going to end up being Joe Biden's VP. Now, I outlined in a previous video that Hillary Clinton has been grooming Kamala Harris and giving her access to her entire team. So when Kamala Harris was running for president, Hillary Clinton was very invested in Kamala, sharing a lot of the same people with Kamala, especially her foreign policy team. But before we go into that, I think it's important to understand that Kamala Harris never was really her own person. And I think that was made really apparent during the campaign trail when she flip-flopped on practically everything she said. So she's not somebody who has strong convictions, that wants to go out there and lead the country and solve all of our problems. Instead, she was just somebody who seemed to be somewhat surprised that she was being considered for president, mainly because she checked off some boxes. She's a woman, she's fairly young, she's in her 50s, she's a senator, she's a woman of color. So there were all of these things that, of course, Democrats really love that Kamala Harris has in checking off these boxes. But one thing she doesn't have is she just doesn't stand for anything. She never has. She flip-flops on everything. Medicare for all. After co-sponsoring the Bernie Sanders legislation for Medicare for All, Harris ended up backtracking, saying that she wasn't comfortable with it. She wasn't comfortable with the amount of money and raising taxes on the middle class. Of course, she said this to a room full of wealthy donors that was set up for her in the Hamptons. She also said at first that she was for abolishing the private insurance industry, if you remember that on CNN when she raised her hand. And then the very next day, she backtracked and said, "Oh, no, I thought you meant I would give up my own private insurance. I didn't know you meant actually abolishing the entire industry." She then settled on some obscure and really confusing 10-year plan to reach Medicare for all, which clearly meant she was not really for it. 10 years to reach Medicare for all is a joke. It just meant that she was trying to say she was for Medicare for all for political reasons, but in reality, she absolutely was not. She was very much in the third way Democrat camp, which is really more Republican, the same camp that Clinton's in and that Obama was in, which is not for Medicare for all. They want to keep their wealthy friends and donors happy. Illegal immigration. Kamala Harris said that she was for decriminalizing the border crossings. And then she said, "Oh, no, I didn't mean that. We need a secure border. We can't really decriminalize, but I'm not actually going to go after it." She did this kind of weird flip-flop thing when she was on The View and Meghan McCain grilled her on it. Kamala kind of said, "No, I'm not for decriminalizing, but yes, I am for decriminalizing. But no, that's not really what I mean," which was pretty much how her entire campaign went. It was, "No, you're not understanding what I'm saying." And it's because she wasn't saying anything ever. She didn't ever want to commit to any policy standpoints because, quite frankly, she's somebody else's puppet, and she knew it. Independent investigations of police shootings. She said, now, of course, with what's going on with George Floyd and the murder of George Floyd, she's saying, "Oh, we must have independent investigations of police shootings." She's acting like she's some big advocate for people. And in reality, she spent her entire career opposed to independent investigations into police shootings. Now she's all for it. Busing. This is a big one. During the debate against Joe Biden, this was the big takedown. This is what rose Kamala Harris up in the polls. It was when she famously took down Joe Biden on his lack of support for a federal mandate on busing kids from different school districts into other districts. So trying to desegregate the schools, because kids right now, they're in schools based on their neighborhoods, where they live. And the idea of busing is to take kids from other neighborhoods and bring them into, kind of mix them up a bit. So Joe Biden was not for a federal mandate on forcing school districts to do this. And Kamala Harris took him down, saying, "I was a student that was bused, and if it weren't for busing, I wouldn't be here today." This was the big famous takedown. Well, it turns out she actually held the exact same position as him, saying that it should be considered by schools but not mandated by the federal government. So her whole takedown of Joe Biden was a joke. I mean, it wasn't real. It was a farce. It was all for political grandstanding. So again, the reason I'm pointing all of this out and her constant flip-flopping on practically everything is, and she lied a lot during the campaign trail when she said she used to smoke weed in college and listen to Tupac when he wasn't even around when she was in college. I mean, there was just a lot of weird stuff going on there. The reason I bring it up is to showcase that Kamala Harris is not her own woman. She is somebody who is made by the political powers that be. She has been climbing politically, and she's known that in order to climb, she has to placate the powers that be around her. She doesn't stand for anything. That is very dangerous because that means somebody else is pulling the strings, somebody else who has an ideology or has invested interests. And in Kamala Harris's case, that person is Hillary Clinton. So now let's go over how and why Hillary Clinton is really the puppet master for Kamala Harris, and why this ultimately poses a big problem with Biden selecting Kamala Harris as VP. So first of all, to show you how Hillary Clinton is actually the puppet master behind Kamala Harris, is Maya Harris is Kamala Harris's sister, and she was a top advisor to the Hillary Clinton campaign and a major player in crafting Hillary Clinton's platform. That is Kamala Harris's sister, top advisor to Hillary Clinton. Maya Harris then turns around and becomes a top advisor for Kamala Harris. Of course, sharing the same Rolodex, sharing the same platform, sharing all the same connections. So the two women have a very strong personal connection through Maya Harris. Because of this, Maya's been able to, with Hillary Clinton's blessing, open Clinton's fundraising Rolodex to Kamala Harris. So Kamala was getting a ton of money and she was getting a lot of support from former Clinton donors, which meant Kamala Harris had to adopt Hillary Clinton's platform to keep those donors happy. That's the way it works. So this is why we saw so much flip-flopping from Kamala Harris. I think that in some instances, I think Kamala Harris might have actually believed in something like Medicare for all. I think she might actually personally think it's the logical, smart way to go. But the minute she opens her mouth and says, I'm for Medicare for all, swiftly her donors say, whoa, 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 no, you're not. You're not, because we're not, remember? And we're the ones who are making you. So she quickly flip-flopped on a lot of her policy ideas. And I think a lot of it was because her donors would turn around and try to set her straight. So, and she recognized that, well, the voters are a bit more progressive. Hillary Clinton's platform doesn't work in 2020. People have moved left. People are wanting more progressive policies. They're wanting policies that are more for the middle class. Kamala Harris, I think, knew that as a politician, but also knew that she had to somehow placate voters and placate her donors. And we saw what that resulted in. A lot of flip-flopping, no real clear direction, and ultimately voters that just really didn't believe in you and weren't really happy with you, which is why she ended up having to get out of the race. But the important thing that Kamala Harris inherited, and what's most important to Hillary, is her foreign policy advisory team. Specifically, she inherited this woman, Michelle Flournoy. Now, Michelle Flournoy is a woman who, she worked in the Defense Department under Bill Clinton. She worked in the Defense Department under Barack Obama. She is widely believed to be the Secretary of Defense once a Democrat gets into office. Now, she was slated to be the Secretary of Defense had Hillary Clinton won. Hillary obviously did not. Michelle Flournoy was offered a position at the current Defense Department in the Trump administration because, guess what? Michelle Flournoy works with both Democrats and Republicans because foreign policy for the two sides have been pretty much one and the same: hawkish, interventionist, and just growing and growing the defense budget. So Michelle Flournoy, she works in an organization right now. She sits on a board, and she's also part of a think tank that has a lot of Republicans that worked in the Bush administration involved. And they're all on the same side. They're all sitting there thinking that this hawkish, interventionist, strong America foreign policy vision is the way forward. So interestingly, Michelle Flournoy, when Obama needed to get a new defense secretary in 2014, and Michelle Flournoy was on the list as a top person who potentially would replace the defense secretary. Michelle Flournoy ended up taking her name out of the running with the Obama administration. Now, she claimed the reason why she took her name out of the running was because, family obligations, family health issues. She wanted to spend more time with her kids. But insiders say that's actually not the case. What happened was she didn't think Obama was hawkish enough. She wanted Obama to be stronger when it came to Russia and China and Afghanistan, Syria. She was more on the camp of more hawkish, more intervention. So the rumor is that is why she ended up not taking the Department of Defense job as the defense secretary under Obama, which would have made her the first female secretary of defense. However, when Hillary Clinton was running for office, Michelle Flournoy was considered the only candidate for Department of Defense for the defense secretary. Clinton wasn't considering anyone else, and Michelle Flournoy was very much expecting to take that job under Hillary because guess what? Hillary's a hawk, so is Michelle Flournoy. So here's what's interesting is that now Michelle Flournoy is considered to be the person who's likely going to be taking over as the defense secretary if and when Joe Biden becomes president of the United States. Why is that? Well, Joe Biden is more hawkish, and quite frankly, it doesn't really matter what Joe Biden is because Joe Biden's on the mental decline. Everybody knows he's on the mental decline, and he is not actually going to be president of the United States, even if he wins. Everybody around him is going to be pulling the strings. He is going to be the face of the presidency. He will be the face of the deep state. It's everybody else who's actually going to be controlling Joe Biden. That is a really good opportunity for somebody like Hillary Clinton, who has a deep-seated need to get back at Vladimir Putin. Now, if you want to understand Hillary Clinton's reasons for wanting to get back at Vladimir Putin, you can watch the video that is linked in this and down below, and that'll spell out the whole entire history of Hillary Clinton and Vladimir Putin's their animosity towards one another, and why Hillary Clinton absolutely wants to get revenge on him. She ultimately, what it boils down to, is believes that he cost her the election. She's the one who really pushed Russiagate. She really believes this. So she wants to do anything she can at this point to get revenge on him. And the way to do that is to control the United States foreign policy. So luckily for her, and this is what we kind of saw throughout the entire Democratic primary, was how in the world did Joe Biden end up with the nomination? I mean, that guy couldn't win New Hampshire or Iowa or New Hampshire, any of the early states. And then suddenly, because he wins the South, an area of the country that Democrats never win in a general election. So I don't know why it matters that much. He couldn't win any of those big states. He couldn't win California. You know, Joe Biden was not doing that well, but somehow the guy ends up being the nominee. Somehow he sweeps through the South, takes Texas, you know, all of these really suspect elections that kind of make you wonder what really was going on there with the Democratic Party. They pretty much had sanctioned that Joe Biden was going to be the guy, and they made damn well sure it happened. So why is that? Well, because Joe Biden can be controlled. And right now, what people in the Hillary Clinton camp who ultimately want to control the country because they believe they were supposed to, they believe it's their right, they believe that it was meant to be them from the beginning and Trump should have never been there, they want control over the country. Joe Biden is a puppet. Here's the problem with Joe Biden. He's not going to last an entire term. I think it's obvious that the guy cannot run a second term. He won't run for re-election, which means whoever is selected as the vice president will ultimately take the reins as president of the United States. Whoever that person is, after about 2.5 to 3 years, Joe Biden will resign and that person will be made president. It will give them the leeway to be president and showcase their skill set for about a year and a half before they have to run for re-election. Maybe even at the 2-year mark, they might tell Biden, it's time to go. You're in mental decline. We now need to go and get our vice president in there. So it would be wonderful for the Clinton camp if Kamala Harris, the person that they ultimately wanted when it looked like Joe Biden wasn't going to be the guy, even though that was, I think, the Democratic Party first pick was Joe Biden. I think when they realized Joe's got a lot of problems and one of the biggest problems is his mental decline, they put a lot of eggs in Kamala Harris. And that was really apparent at the beginning of the campaign when Kamala got all the media attention. It was very clear that she was the one that they were picking as their anointed. And then when Kamala fell flat on her face because Tulsi Gabbard took her down, which is why Hillary Clinton ended up hating Tulsi Gabbard and going after Tulsi Gabbard, that is when they kind of moved on to Pete Buttigieg for a minute, and that was really clear. And then they realized, oh, Pete's got some problems with racial issues, even though so does Kamala. But whatever. She's at least a black woman, so we can kind of skirt over that. And so does Joe Biden. But whatever, he's got a goofy smile and tells funny jokes. Maybe people will get over it. But ultimately, Hillary Clinton will get her woman that she's controlling in that White House, which means Hillary Clinton will be controlling the White House. Make no mistake about that. That is ultimately what is going on. Again, I connect all of the dots between Hillary Clinton and Putin and her need to get revenge on him. I spell all of that out and go into more detail about Michelle Flournoy, who Hillary Clinton then gave to Kamala Harris as a foreign policy advisor, and who is in good with Kamala. Because here's the problem. If Joe Biden takes Michelle Flournoy and makes her the defense secretary, and then Joe Biden is forced to step aside, whoever that vice president pick is that takes over needs to be on board with all of these same Washington insider Clinton camp people. That person has to be okay with that team. Anybody else, like Elizabeth Warren, might not be. There's kind of a little bit of a wild card issue with Elizabeth Warren that I don't think they're really that comfortable with. So it is increasingly looking like to me that Kamala Harris is likely to get that VP pick. And if she does, that means Hillary Clinton is actually going to be controlling the presidency of the United States. Again, click on the link down below. It'll take you to the other video, or the box right here or here. I'm not sure where it's going, but click on that. That'll take you to the other video, and you can watch the whole history of why Hillary Clinton hates Vladimir Putin and how all of those dots connect back to Kamala Harris. Thank you so much for watching.